Thanks for staying with us. Two gentlemen, as you've seen in the welcoming slide, join us for this conversation. Dayo Akintobi is editor-in-chief, Today Community newspaper, as well as Shehu Bashir, who is coordinator, Tinubu Solidarity Movement, Kwara State. Both of them join us virtually. Thanks for joining us this morning. Mr. Akintobi, let me begin with you. It seems that every election cycle, we have to have this certificates controversies. Every election cycle since 1999. Why, in your opinion, does it matter?
Well, it does matter because apart from the electoral law and the constitution, there's also the public's right to know what the educational background of the people who seek to represent us are. We have a duty of care to ensure that those that we choose to lead us have the intellectual depth and the cosmopolitan type take to manage their rights. And actually, we have an obligation to scrutinize the educational background and qualifications. It is for this reason that it is a requirement of both the Electoral Act and the Constitution that there is a minimum benchmark of education that any aspirant for political office must attain. And it is the responsibility of that aspirant to prove before the regulator that he or she has attained that minimum benchmark. Well, the easiest way to do that, of course, is to present a certificate. But truth be told, certificates from 40, 50 years ago sometimes might be difficult to come by. And as a result, alternatives are sought, like affidavits and things like that. But this is what is leading to all the various controversies, is the fact that affidavits sometimes do not answer enough questions, particularly where there seem to have been discrepancies between what is being said now and what has been said before.
This is not without prejudice, Mr. Akintobi, to the fact that this particular controversy has been on as well since 1999. But let me ask Mr. Bashir this one, perhaps as a follow-up to what you have said. Well, Mr. Bashir, well, this conversation is not just starting now, especially concerning the APC presidential candidate. All these kinds of obscurity, so to speak, uncertainties, all of that. So how does this really bother the campaign movement that you support?
Thank you for having me. First and foremost, let me say something. You talked about election cycle. Actually, you don't expect an election of this magnitude not to be scrutinized. This notwithstanding, it doesn't mean that every scrutiny is correct or is in good faith. Most of these scrutinies are actually in bad faith, so to say. Okay, we know very well the caliber of those that contest these elections, unlike any other previous elections, particularly the person of Tinubu. And we know how challenging it has been for people to actually come up with one or two things against him in the past. Now that he has not been a candidate in the end of the election in the last 13 years or thereabouts, now is a candidate of the biggest election in the country. We expect that this will come up. Where what I always, said since the beginning of this saga is, there's only two things that can be done here. One, you can be aggrieved against a particular candidate and say no to him, vote him out or vote him in the election. If you are aggrieved, go to court. For me, I think we have expressed so much opinion on something that has to do with legality or illegitimacy of an action. Okay, I don't think we need to bother so much. There have been a lot of debate on social media and all the rest. And I say, look, our opinions on social media cannot matter in reality in the genuineness, legality, or qualification of the candidate, unless a court so pronounced, okay, that such candidate is not qualified. Any other opinion we are expressing is basically on what comes in the election. So as it is, I don't think this actually is a big deal for Ashwaju that I know. Because we know in the past, things that have come up, it has gone to court, gone to panel of inquiry, and it has been trashed. So I don't know why people are just bringing up. But I know I understand one thing for sure. There's a way you play a kind of mind game, on the mind of the people. You want people to see a particular candidate as being on the wrong side. So they sponsor all kind of wrong information ahead of election. But it doesn't really matter for those who know the way the game works. So for me, I'm not sure it has anything to do with Ashwaju's campaign. the campaign is going on fine, everybody is going on fine, nobody will take it very serious because we believe that no law is broken and no rules have been violated. So we move on.
Joe, is it a game that is being circulated where, because I mean, first of all, is that the man you're campaigning for, people will assume that you know him well, and such, and as such, you should be able to answer certain things that perhaps people may want to know. There's this matter circulating that he submitted an affidavit to INEC saying that he went on self-exile from 1994, and then his certificate was looted by unknown persons, and then now there are questions concerning several, perhaps his real age, his identity, did he go to school, who really is he? So when people ask those kinds of questions, to you, is it a game? Isn't it legitimate for people to want to find out what the real thing is or who the real person is?
Well, let me answer you in this way. For those that want to vote, who want to determine who their candidate will be, they have the right to ask questions. Okay? But for the form that any candidate will have submitted to the INEC, it is for INEC to work with. It is going to be within the discussion, the legal discussion of the INEC to determine whether a particular document suffices or not. Okay? It is within the INEC power to determine whether this document is genuine or not. So what a candidate submits to INEC to scrutinize is for INEC to work with officially. Okay? What people see from that document is for able to determine whether the argument profiled by the candidate is genuine or not, for them to make a decision. So as far as I'm concerned, like I did say, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure there's so much good intention from those, spreading these fake news. And I can tell you for sure, Tinubu is a well-nurtured, well-educated individual who has done so much in this country, who everybody knows has the right education, the basic requirements of education to qualify for the position of office of the president. I want to tell you, the law does not even say you must have degree or not. You don't only speculate the least qualification to have, which he has. Okay?
Oh,
it doesn't matter.
Are you suggesting that he doesn't have a degree?
He does, of course. I'm telling you, he does. He does have a degree. That's what I'm saying.
Which one?
The law says,
which one have you seen?
He has a university degree. Of course, the letter is everywhere. The memo from the University of Chicago State University is everywhere.
Which one have you seen?
Pardon?
Which one have you seen?
I have seen the one written by Chicago State University, confirming that actually was the student and graduate from Chicago State University. So anything to the contrary is just mischief. I can say that.
All right,
anything to the contrary is just mischief. Okay. People don't have. I'm coming, please. People don't have as much genuine information for the good cause that they have mischievous information for the bad cause.
Have genuine information. Since you have genuine information, how old is he?
Actually, Tinubu celebrated his 70th birthday last year, November. What more do you want to know, Mr. Chamberlain?
Is that his real age?
It is, of course, it's his real age. What are you looking for? Why are you looking for a second opinion? This was somebody, that's something I want to ask for people. Why do you need second opinion for somebody who has actually...
No, we need to get to the second guest because there are two of you on the show, so just hang on a minute. Mr. Akintobi, what do you think of this?
Well, I think that it's incumbent upon the candidate to fulfill all righteousness in every aspect of the qualification process, beginning with the regulator. There are three different entities involved here. There's a regulator, there's the candidate himself, and then, of course, there's the electorate. The very first threshold that needs to be crossed is the regulator. And that regulator operates according to both the Electoral Act and the Constitution. And what those two say, the gentleman is correct, is that you need to have attended, to have been educated up to primary school level. But there has to be some verification of that attendance up to secondary school level. Now, what has precipitated the current controversy is that purportedly the forms that Bola Tinubu submitted to INEC recently, he left the space blank for primary school, left the space blank for secondary school, and where the space asking about his university education, he simply put in his degree. Well, that, in the view of many Nigerians, does not meet the threshold that is required by law in terms of proving that you are educated to a minimum of secondary school level, or whether it is primary school level, whatever the law says. So I say for Asiwaju Bola Tinubu to put this controversy to rest, it is very easy. He has submitted an affidavit. We accept, as Nigerians, we do not believe that anyone will swear to an oath under false pretenses. We give you benefit of the doubt that that affidavit is true and honest. But the affidavit does not in and of itself represent proof of the fact that you've been educated up to a minimum level. Now, we accept that certificates were looted, but every educational institution in the world has an archive from which they can pull your records. Even if your certificates are lost, they can write a letter attesting to the fact that you attended from so-so year to so-so year, and you completed class this to class this, and perhaps this was your school number while you were in the institution. So what I'm saying is, I think at this point, because the stakes are so high at the presidential level, remember this issue has come up before when Tinubu was running for Senate in 1993 and when he was running for governor in 1999, to the point that Lake Ganifa had to go to court all the way to the Supreme Court, and that issue has not been put to bed. But because the stakes are so high now at the presidential level,
all right,
I put the burden back on Tinubu to clear the air by simply asking any of the institutions he attended to provide proof. His certificates are missing, but he can provide a transcript or a letter to that effect and submit to INEC, not social media.
Mr. Shehu, quickly, isn't that a simple thing to do? Shouldn't it be done? Mr. Bashir Shehu.
If the law requires him to do it, he will. If the law does not mandate him to do it, he won't do anything within the confines of the law. Simple as ABC.
Okay. Well, we have to thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of this conversation this morning. Rather short, I'd say. Dayo Akintobi is editor-in-chief Today Community Newspaper, as well as Shehu Bashir, coordinator, Tinubu Solidarity Movement in Kwara State. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation.
Thank you for having me.